Okay, hello. I am going to be covering Saturn in the seventh house of your D9 Navamsa chart in this video, right? I have covered other planets like Sun, Moon, Mercury, and many other planets in the seventh house, and I've also made your destined partner in astrology part one of that video because I've only taken D1 seventh house. I wanted your suggestion if you want a part two of that video for Navamsa chart, like understanding your destined partner through astrology, by looking at your Navamsha chart, the seventh house of your Navamsha chart, and also the first and the seventh axis, like how to read Navamsha chart. All right, so let me know in the comments if you want me to make a video on that as well. Now let's start with the seventh house of your Navamsha chart having Saturn in it. So whenever Saturn is there in the seventh house, I would say Saturn would represent the working class or the worker, right? This is why we actually say कि Saturn और Sun अलग क्यों होते हैं, because Saturn is that planet that represents the masses, the working class, and Sun king को represent करता है, right? So king हमेशा एक होता है और Saturn जो कि working class है वो हमेशा group में होते हैं, राइट. सो सैटर्न जो है वो एक वर्किंग क्लास को रिप्रेजेंट करता है, राइट. सो द easiest way to please Saturn is to put in efforts, and this is what Saturn in the seventh house of D9 Navamsha chart is telling, that you need to put efforts in relationships. That is how you make Saturn happy, right? So whenever you have Saturn in the seventh house of your D9 chart, the first thing that it shows is that स्पेशली इनिशियल फेज में, आपके लाइफ के इनिशियल फेज में आपको कुछ ना कुछ रिश्तों में या इन जनरली, इट्स नॉट जस्ट अबाउट रोमांटिक रिलेशनशिप्स, दिस कैन बी इन कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल डीलिंग्स ऑल्सो, यू वुड फेस सम और दी अदर प्रॉब्लम्स. अभी किसी ना किसी तरीके की प्रॉब्लम्स होंगी. यानी क्यों आ रही है प्रॉब्लम्स? ये इसलिए आ रही है बिकॉज सैटर्न हैज सम काइंड ऑफ कार्मिक डेट स्टोर फॉर यू एंड इट नीड्स यू टू पे इट ऑफ. दैट मीन्स Saturn wants you to understand a particular lesson, right? This is why anyone who has Saturn in the seventh house of your D9, you'll see this one pattern in your life कि initially या पहले के आपके जो एज है, स्पेशली बिफोर द एज ऑफ 28 और 30, आपके रिश्तों में बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स आ रही थी. ऑल राइट, बट द मोमेंट यू लर्न द लेसन, द मोमेंट यू अंडरस्टैंड कि नहीं, सैटर्न कुछ दिखाना चाह रहा है, कुछ रियलिटी दिखाना चाह रहा है, द मोमेंट यू एक्सेप्ट दैट रियलिटी, द मोमेंट यू स्टार्ट लर्निंग फ्रॉम दोज लेसन्स is when Saturn gets happy and Saturn starts blessing you. Because you have to remember that Saturn in the seventh house is actually a placement wherein Saturn is very much capable of giving you a partner जो कि बहुत devoted होगा, right? Because remember, Saturn is what? Saturn is the working class. It's the laborer class, or it's actually the serving class or the servants. And what is the job of a servant, or what is the job of a worker? To work for the superior, to be devoted to them, right? To be loyal to them. So Saturn has the capacity to bless you with that one devoted person. But now it's on you. When do you activate that Saturn? All right, because you have to understand कि हम हमेशा सोचते हैं कि D9 चार्ट ऐसा चार्ट है जो हमेशा शादी के बाद एक्टिवेट होता है. वेल yes, that is true, a part of that is true, but the thing is you have to understand that Saturn being, or any other planet for that matter, being in the seventh house of D9 is always working behind the scenes. आप चाहे किसी भी एज के हो, वेन एवर यू आर डीलिंग विथ एनी पर्सन, जब आप किसी के भी सामने आप डील कर रहे हो, चाहे वो डीलिंग एक रोमांटिक रिलेशन हो, चाहे वो डीलिंग एक कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल रिलेशन हो, और बी इट फॉर एनी अदर मैटर, योर D9 चार्ट इज ऑलवेज वर्किंग बिहाइंड द सीन. क्योंकि सेवेंथ हाउस का वो कोर एलिमेंट है, दैट इज लाइक द ऐसे एक सेंट्रल एलिमेंट है आपके सेवेंथ हाउस का. This is why D9 chart becomes very important. Of course, you have to look at the D1 chart first and then at the D9 chart, but D9 chart cannot be ignored. And this is why Saturn gets exalted in the seventh house. Because Saturn यहाँ पे एक lesson सिखाना चाह रहे हैं कि रिश्तों में excessive देना या किसी से बस excessively लेते जाना, ये दोनों में ही balance नहीं है. So Saturn wants you to understand some lessons. एंड एक बैलेंस वो चाहते हैं कि आप हर रिश्ते में एक बैलेंस बना के चलो. एंड वंस यू स्टार्ट डूइंग दिस, बिकॉज यू हैव Saturn in the seventh house of your D9 chart, this is why I'm giving you this remedy, कि once you start learning from these lessons, Saturn would want to bless you, right, with the right person. बिकॉज रिमेंबर, Saturn का गोल ये है कि Saturn wants you to understand that this being in the seventh house, it wants you to focus on things that truly matter in relationships. तो Saturn को कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता if you go for person who's very good looking or person who has a lot of talents or any person who's very funny. No, Saturn is not pleased by all of these. Once you look at things जो कि genuinely matter करती हैं, like a person who is always there to stand by you. हो सकता है वो इंसान उतना रोमांटिक नहीं हो, बट सैटर्न वही आपको रियलिटी दिखाते हैं कि नॉट एवरीथिंग हैज टू बी दिस ड्रीमी लैंड और लाला लैंड. There are certain practical things that Saturn wants you to understand. So once you start accepting those things, that is when Saturn gets happy. The more you revolt, the more you rebel, Saturn would be like, no, you've still not learned the lesson. Okay, so I'm still holding my blessings. So ये situation हो जाता है Saturn in the 7th house of D9 में. So as I said all of these things, at the same time spouse भी जो होते हैं, they usually have a very typical Saturn like personality. Because marriage क्या होता है, marriage, whenever Saturn is there in the 7th house of your D9, you have to understand that marriage is about responsibility. Because marriage एक तरीके से Saturn reality बताना चाह रहा है. And to be very honest, be it anyone in this world, जब तक एक marriage में responsibility नहीं होगा, जब तक एक marriage में burdens share नहीं किए जाएंगे, वो marriage नहीं चल सकती. And this is why Saturn gets exalted in the 7th house. कोई भी relation में there has to be honesty, there has to be a balance, and there has to be consistency. Saturn वैसे नहीं है कि अच्छा आज mood नहीं है efforts डालने का तो चलो आज नहीं डालते हैं. नहीं, that is not how you make Saturn happy, right? So with Saturn being in the 7th house, the partner is someone who wants to work, right? So एक workaholic behavior दिखता है partner का. Plus the partner has, now again depends on a lot of other things. Usually I am just looking at Saturn in the 7th house. अब मुझे नहीं पता कि आपके Saturn के साथ Venus है, कि Saturn के साथ चंद्रमा है, कि Saturn के साथ मंगल है. तो सिर्फ जब Saturn है 7th house में, तो I can say the partner in general would be very sturdy looking. All right, and this is a very practical partner. This is not the kind of a partner जो कि बहुत ड्रीमी है और बातें बिल्कुल हवा में बातें नहीं, ये सब चीज़ें नहीं होती है मैरिज में. And this is why Saturn gives you this reality check. So because I said कि Saturn tests you, so there is a lot of there's this big chance that before marriage or maybe in the initial phase of life, Saturn आपकी तरफ tests ऐसे डालते हैं. Okay, so you might fall for the wrong person, right? And because of this, you would maybe something happens, or once you know the true colors of that person, you feel that heartbreak or that heartache, right? And that is where Saturn is coming along and saying that this is the lesson I wanted you to learn. That why did you fall for all of these external factors? You did not understand the practicality, you didn't understand what truly matters. And what actually truly matters is the devotion, the loyalty, and the efforts that are being put in the relations. And यही Saturn समझाना चाहते हैं. So there is another thing that I want to say with Saturn being in the 7th house, that you always have to judge the person rightly before you get married to them. Okay, with a placement like this, don't fall for external looks, don't fall for factors that are just external or बस मन को अच्छा लग रहा है या दिल को अच्छा लग रहा है. नहीं, with Saturn being in the 7th house, you have to look at the long run. Devotion, loyalty, practicality, responsibility, maturity, you have to see all of these things, right? And remember कि जब Saturn होते हैं 7th house में, in general partner के साथ भी ये एक तरीका होता ही होता है कि initially the partner might also have faced a lot of struggles in life. Because आज जाके आपको जो पार्टनर मिलेगा, whoever you end up marrying, that person is going to be someone who's mature. Now until and unless कुछ ऐसे positions हैं, अब यहाँ पे मर्क्यूरी और चंद्रमा के जितने heavy influence होंगे वहाँ पे maturity कम होती जाती है, चाइल्ड लाइक बिहेवियर ज़्यादा आता है. But because we're only talking about Saturn here, so Saturn सिर्फ जब Saturn 7th house में होते हैं, the partner is someone who is more mature. अब ये mature looks में भी हो सकता है, but in general this maturity talks about their experiences in life. This is a person जिसने experience किया है life को, right? And because of their experiences, they have turned into this mature person. So Saturn in the 7th house actually gives a partner who would be a great companion, who would actually be there to guide you. And ये जो वो guide करते हैं, वो कोई ऐसे false लाला लैंड वाला guiding नहीं है. It's actually the guidance जो the kind of guidance that you need in this practical world. सो एट टाइम्स ये फीलिंग हो सकती है कि क्योंकि प्रैक्टिकलिटी है, यहाँ पे रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, इक्वल गिव एंड टेक को यू आर ट्राइंग टू अचीव दैट बैलेंस ऑफ इक्वल गिव एंड टेक, देर आर टाइम्स वेर इन यू फील कि एक ड्राइनेस है मैरिज में, वो फीलिंग एक आती है. बट द थिंग इज दिस इज ओनली ट्रू इफ लेट्स से सैटर्न इज अफ्लिक्टेड. This is what I have seen, all right? Because Saturn here is capable of giving a partner who's very devoted and who would stand by your side whenever कुछ ऐसी परेशानी आती है जब आपको लगे कि कोई साथ नहीं है. तो सैटर्न जब 7th हाउस में होता है, इट इज़ वेरी मच केपेबल ऑफ गिविंग यू अ वेरी स्टर्डी पार्टनर, जो हर छोटी छोटे लाइफ में ऐसे छोटे मोटे प्रॉब्लम से या फ्रिक्शन से भाग नहीं जाता है. वैसे इंसान जो कि रिलायबल है, सैटर्न इज वेरी मच केपेबल ऑफ गिविंग दोज काइंड ऑफ पर्सन to you, right? But the problem is Saturn here is also capable of delaying the marriage, but not denying. All right. When it comes to delaying the marriage, you have to check your D1 as well, right? आपके D1 chart के 7th house को, plus you have to check your Venus. That is very important. And also you have to check your Jupiter. I know a lot of people say that Jupiter is not that important when it comes to marriage, but I have seen Jupiter, especially for females, you have to see a part of Jupiter. Like a lot of the things have to be judged and analyzed, and then only you can form a conclusion कि Saturn 7th house में marriage को delay करते हैं कि नहीं. You have to look at your 7th house of your D1 chart. You have to look at your Venus in D1. If you're a female watching this, then you also have to look at Jupiter, right? And you have to look at your 7th house of Navamsa and Venus in Navamsa. All of these things are very important, right? So the easiest way to work in a marriage with a placement like this is to have equal amounts of efforts being taken from both the sides. All right, because remember जब Saturn 7th house में होते हैं in the D9 chart, if you jump into a relationship with a placement like this, Saturn would be like, okay, you have done what you wanted to do, you did not want to listen to me, all right, now you wait and watch. So what happens is आप ऐसे इंसान के साथ जंप कर रहे हो रिलेशन में वेर इन यू धीरे धीरे आपको वो कलर्स दिख रहे हैं, द रियल शेड्स, एंड देन यू फील कि ओ वेट, आई डिड नॉट एक्सपेक्ट दिस, बिकॉज सैटर्न इज समवन हु इज ट्राइंग टू टेस्ट यू, राइट? सो यू डोंट हैव टू फॉल इन द ट्रैप. ऑलराइट, सो इनिशियली, ये मैं इनिशियल लाइफ का बता रही हूँ, आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट द मैरिज, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट योर इनिशियल लाइफ. कि पहले मैरिज के पहले देर इज़ अ हाई चांस कि यू माइट गेट इन्फैचुएटेड बाय पीपल हु आर हैविंग सर्टेन ट्रेट्स जो आपको इट feels good to have those features, maybe like being very good looking, being very flashy. All of these things are some things जो Saturn आपको टेस्ट के जैसे दे रहे हैं. Okay, or maybe someone who's very romantic, who's very sweet when it comes to talking, and then you see the real side. So ये सारी जो चीज़ें हैं एक तरीके का एक टेस्ट है जो Saturn आपकी तरफ डाल रहे हैं. Now if you fall for the trap, then Saturn is like, fine, you don't want to listen to me, you fell for the trap, now you learn the lesson. So Saturn wants you to judge people rightly, राइट? सो जब भी 7th हाउस में Saturn होता है, उसका बेसिकली मेन एम ये है, Saturn का मेन एम ये है कि it wants you to understand the right kind of person that is needed for marriage, because that is your karma, that is your karmic debt. You need to understand that there is this one person who's meant for you, and that is going to be the right person for you. You don't have to fall for these superficial factors. And also remember that a Saturn placement like this would generally ease with time. So it's always better to marry a little later, especially with a placement like this. Again, I would not say that this is applied for every person who's watching this video, because I don't know what ascendant you are in your D9 chart. I don't know what is exactly in your 7th house of your D1 chart. But in general, if let's say your D1 chart is also influenced by Saturn being in the 7th house, and you also have Saturn being in the 7th house of your D9, it is advised to get married a little late in life. Because Saturn mature ho jata hai, and once Saturn matures, Saturn is like, fine, you have learned the lesson, and once you also start learning the lesson, Saturn starts blessing you. Because Saturn ke sath, this is the thing, that it tests you first, and it first wants to judge if you are worthy of those blessings or not. Once you're able to make Saturn happy with your efforts, then Saturn is like, fine, You take my blessings. And this is why it gets exalted in the seventh house, you know. It is about give and take. Saturn, that is what Saturn talks about. It wants you to understand the exact meaning of relationship. It wants you to understand that stability in relationships. That is why seventh house is the exaltation point of Saturn. A planet like moon or Mars, these are very agile planets. These are like itne volatile hain that they would change their mood. Like moon being in the seventh house, moody spouse, you know, the relation is always, because look at the sky, moon is never in the same condition. Kabhi crescent moon, it's a half moon someday, it's a full moon someday. But when it comes to Saturn, it's very sturdy, right? So Saturn wants you to give that solid sturdy marriage, right? But with a test that you have to pass initially. That is what unlocks the blessings of Saturn being in the seventh house, right? But yes, in general, the person that you end up marrying is going to be someone who is, all about work. They are all about practical things. They're very much focused on things that are important in life. Like paying off the bills, paying off anything that is important. Like they wouldn't be the best person to talk about romantic things. However, you have to understand, if let's say fifth and seventh में कोई combination बन रहा है, right? Or if let's say you have like Venus being in the fifth house, right? Or Venus is aspecting your Saturn. All of these positions change things quite a lot. If let's say Mercury is there, then again Saturn, this person would be very talkative as well. And it can also be like your marriage can be very secretive also at the same time. So all of these things matter. Like you have to understand the whole position by looking at the sign that Saturn is placed in. You have to check if your fifth house and your seventh house is making any kind of combination. So you have to check all of these things, and especially the position of Venus, because Saturn is very much capable of giving you a very friend-like spouse, a loyal friend-like spouse, who is more mature than you, and who is someone who talks about practical things of life, right? And you have to check for afflictions as well. Saturn का lord कहाँ placed है, that is very important. Seventh lord, which house is the seventh lord landing into? So a lot of things have to be checked when it comes to your seventh house. But yes, in general, this is all I had to say, for Saturn being in the seventh house. Well, I do have a lot of other things to say as well, but I would need your seventh house position more in detail. I would want to know which ascendant you are, right? I would want to know what exactly is happening with your seventh lord. That gives a very clear picture. But yes, this would be the crux, right? This would be the base rather. This is the foundation information that I'm giving you. नाउ इस पे कुछ इंटेंसिटी ज़्यादा होगी, कुछ चीज़ों की इंटेंसिटी आपके केस में कम हो सकती है. वो कैसे पता चलेगा? आपके पूरे चार्ट को देख के, राइट? बिकॉज n number of people will have Saturn in the seventh house of their D9 chart, but not everyone will get the same results. किसी का results, किसी के लिए Saturn can be of massive blessings, because remember Saturn is very much capable of giving you success in life, stable sturdy success in life, because Saturn is a slow moving planet, but it's very steady. ऐसा नहीं कि आज सैटर्न धीरे चल रहे, कल कुछ दिया, परसों छीन लिया. नहीं, दैट्स नॉट सैटर्न. Saturn is like it tests you first, but once it sees that you are working, you are being consistent, you are working towards your goals consistently, it starts blessing you, and it does not snatch away those blessings. There's no delusion when it comes to Saturn. It's very clear cut. This is why you have to see what exactly is happening with the lord of the seventh house, because so many people would have Saturn in the seventh house, and then to check exactly the amount of blessings that Saturn is able to give you being in the seventh house, you have to check the aspects, you have to check the condition of Saturn, and you also have to check the condition of the seventh lord and Venus in your D9 Navamsa. Alright, so this was my take on Saturn being in the seventh house, and please do let me know if you want a video on Navamsa chart, the first and the seventh axis of Navamsa chart, and how to read first and the seventh axis of Navamsa chart, and your destined married life. Alright, I might make a video on that probably like a week later. So let me know your views on it, or any kind of videos that you want from my side. So thank you so much for watching.